2016, there was strong opposition to legalizing marijuana. A lot of that opposition coming from Governor Doug Ducey, as well as the Arizona Chamber of Commerce. Still, Proposition 205 only lost by 67,000 votes, and supporters of this latest effort are hoping to learn from their past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Brian Penny. Welcome to Thought for Your Pennies, Weed Plea. Today, what we're going to talk about is Smart and Safe Arizona. It's petition number I-232020 that seeks to legalize recreational cannabis use in Arizona. Now, it just so happened that I spoke with Asnani this week. He's the co-founder of iLava and a partner in the downtown D2 dispensaries in Tucson. I also came across a Facebook stream from Stephen David Wisniewski, the head of Safer Arizona, the grassroots movement that opposed the recreational Proposition 205 in the 2016 election. Between the two of them, we could see two different sides of the cannabis industry, the dispensaries and the activists, coming together and supporting one bill, but for very different reasons. Let's look at what Wisniewski in Safer Arizona has to say about it. Wisniewski posted a video with Phoenix cannabis attorney Tom Dean on January 2nd, 2020.
Has a marijuana initiative they're collecting signatures for right now, the Smart and Safe initiative. And first and foremost, I want to let everyone know that I'm a yes vote on the Smart and Safe initiative, and I think everyone else should vote yes as well.
For example, the Medical Marijuana Act, all of the card applications and the dispensary applications, that is what funds the program. But it's so excessive right now that we have millions and millions of dollars in the account and nobody knows what to do with it. But they won't reduce the application fee for the card because we have people like Sheila Polk who you know, kind of bang their fist on the desk saying, if you lower the cost of the card, that'll only encourage people to want to become medical marijuana patients, which I don't see how that's a bad thing.
Yeah, it's fine with me. I think everybody should be able to be legal.
But we did de facto reduce the price when we were able to increase the duration of each license from 1 year to 2 years.
Well, we're going to be starting the very beginning infant stages of the 2024 initiative pretty much this weekend, but it's a long, drawn-out process. And in the meantime, vote yes on the Smart and Safe initiative. There's a lot that it's going to do for Arizona. It's going to do a lot to reduce arrests and make legal access available for everyone 21 and over, and so it's important that it passes. Why do you think the 2020 initiative needs to pass?
Well, I think, number one is just the number of people who will no longer be subject to arrest, no longer be subject to felony charges. Every possession charge in Arizona, in Maricopa County anyhow, which are about more than half of the total charges statewide, are charged as felonies. It's great for all, not just cannabis consumers, but all Arizonans. Get a break when we are able to legalize this relatively harmless substance.
There's also a couple other reasons. One of the reasons I think this needs to pass is because what we witnessed when Prop 205 failed is the same style group of people appearing 4 years later and running another initiative that's kind of similar to Prop 205. We have a limited market. We're only getting 6 plants now. In Prop 205, they were fake and all that stuff, but it's essentially another limited market coming 4 years later. Now, I can expect that if this fails in 2020, we're going to see that happen again.
They obviously aren't going to do anything against their own self-interest, so that means they're going to keep the number of licenses limited so as not to dilute their own value of their own license. So, yeah, I think you're right. If this fails, the next industry initiative is going to look very similar.
Right, and
we
so
gotta get past this point.
Right, and so then we'd be looking at 2024 with an initiative that we're looking at right now, and we're going to maybe have a competing initiative because people aren't going to like it, and maybe it cancels out 2024 because it was bad, and then we're pushed out to 2028 or 2032. We got to get this initiative out of the way because then we're going to have a free and clear shot to fix it. Because why would these guys running this initiative want to run an initiative for 2024 right after their initiative passed? They already expect to build up and make money on this initiative.
Yeah, that's right. Once we have legalization and we're over that hurdle, Arizona is going to be a much more attractive market to other people that would like to be involved in the cannabis industry. And as those opportunities become lesser and lesser, people will become more and more willing to spend money to have a shot.
We're already seeing that coming from the Arizona Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. They already want to expand licenses.
That's a good example. The Arizona Chamber of Commerce doing the same thing. We're going to see more and more of that. So what we'd like to do is approach those other industry concerns, whether they're in Arizona or even outside of Arizona, who are interested in participating in this market. They're the ones who should finance it. But the quid pro quo would be that we want much deeper reform in the way of consumer rights.
So that's what we got going on. We're excited. I am pumped up. I hope you're pumped up, Tom.
Yep, this is great.
Oh,
I mean, this I'm pumped up to get 2020 passed. I'm really pumped up about that because even though we're talking about improving on it, I think it's a much better initiative than what we had back in 2016. I think that the industry took to heart a lot of the objections that were made in the consumer activist community, which is why I think primarily it failed, although often you won't read about that. But the truth of the matter is the reason it failed was because the industry back then didn't have the support of the consumers. That's really why it failed. Had they had that support, it definitely would have passed easily. The numbers don't lie. So this one is markedly improved, I think improved enough to where every consumer out there should feel good about voting yes.
absolutely. I'm voting yes. Until next time.
So as you can see, the local Arizona activist community wants this law to pass, essentially so that they can take a baby step forward towards changing it later. Something that I personally went to Hempville Farms to remind Wisniewski in the 2016 election. It's good to know he's actually paying attention, and he definitely has a lot more mature approach. But before I had seen this, I had actually spoke with Mo. So let's play some of that conversation now. I'm going to warn you, it's a pretty long one, so you're just going to be staring at my face for a little bit while you listen. And his.
Sure. So my full name is Mohit, M-O-H-I-T, but I go by Mo, M-O-E. And my last name is A-S-N-A-N-I.
Failed. And so I had talked to was it David Wisniewski? He was the Safer Arizona, that's what it was. The people that were opposing it, essentially, and the Hempville Farms and all those people. I'm trying to get a hold of him, actually, sometime this year, too, because I want to find out what his plans are for this. Like, have you guys talked to the people that opposed it last year? Have you heard any opposition besides the Chamber of Commerce in there?
I'm not sure what their position is. All I'll say is that the people that they care about, the ones who are the communities that are targeted more, the activists, if you will, the people who are the most vulnerable in terms of getting arrested or going to jail. Since the initiative failed in 2016, I have to, look up the source for these numbers. I remember reading it. It might even have been the Phoenix New Times. I remember reading that there were 21,000 marijuana-related arrests between 2016 to I want to say 2018 or 2019 here in Arizona. And to me, if you're an activist and you're for the people and you want to do the whole grassroots, let's get the posters and stand outside or the signs and stand outside the legislature type of thing. To me, I look at the numbers and I'm like, what did you win? We lost, but what did you win? 21,000 people arrested. Several of them probably got convicted. This Jones thing, concentrates are at risk. For what? I don't get that. And I think those are the questions they're going to have to answer if they choose not to be on the side of smart and safe. Because to me, those people that they care about, their friends, their families, they're the ones who have been affected probably the most, by this.
If and when the law goes into place, then at that point, when it's actually in effect, then is it safe to assume that dispensaries around Arizona are going to start offering live plants and seeds and grow classes and these types of things?
Yes. I think it's going to be a choice, right? It's going to be an option for dispensaries to do that, or for these hybrid stores, really, that you'll have, which would be part dispensary, part adult use store. But yeah, as far as I look at it, seeds are something that, there's a massive opportunity there. And a lot of people do want to grow their own. And that's why when some states have said, hey, we're going to have, this rec law or an adult use law and not home grow, I think that's kind of where it goes topsy-turvy. People need to try to grow themselves. Some of them may be really successful at it and some of them won't. And I think that's just something where they need to have the right to try it out.
I know that the average consumer, it's still kind of it's an advanced thing. Most people don't have a green thumb for a house plant, much less understanding.
It's actually a pretty hard plant to grow. I can tell you that people are always like, yeah, it's a weed. You can just throw it out there, a seed out there, and then it'll grow really well.
Hold on.
No, it'll grow. It just won't grow really well. Have you been keeping with what happened in Illinois the last couple days?
So I've been watching the people on Twitter and Facebook posting that like they're all lined up like crazy and posting the prices. Dude, they were selling like essentially 75. What the guy had was 3 grams. I think he had bought total that were $77 a piece. Plus they had $80 total of taxes added to that. So he spent like $300 basically on the 3 grams of concentrate. And these people were lining up in droves to do it.
So I'll tell you one thing about Illinois that's very different. First of all, Illinois has a very small number of stores, right? I mean, we in Arizona were obviously far much smaller than, we don't have a city like Chicago. Phoenix is a large city, but it's not Chicago, right?
Right.
So their population is significantly higher than ours, and they only have, I think, a few dozen stores operating. And when I say a few dozen, I think between 24 to 36 statewide. And Illinois only has 18 cultivation licenses, 18 or 19, I don't remember off the top of my head, that they issued. So those suppliers, those 2 dozen or 3 dozen suppliers, or stores rather, reliant on only 18 licensees, who I think half of them might be operational fully, and I don't know about the rest. So you're looking at maybe 10 to 12 cultivation facilities that are supposed to supply the great state of Illinois, which makes it a little bit hard, and over here, you already have about 100 cultivation facilities up and running. So that should give you maybe a little bit of perspective. Now, some are small. I have a 50,000 square foot cultivation here in Tucson, and then obviously there's guys like Sunday Goods and Copper State that have much larger facilities. But we're not going to see the supply crunch necessarily that they're seeing over there. So I think we're better positioned. And the other thing about Illinois, the main thing was the expungement part is on New Year's Eve, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, he did 11,000, I want to say felony. He removed basically all these felonies from people's records.
He pardoned them.
Yeah.
It was 11,017 pardons.
Yeah, so that's exactly the thing. I mean, think about, there's 11,000 people there whose lives are going to be genuinely impacted by that legislation that passed in Illinois. And that's what we're trying to do with Smart and Safe. And that's why I think for us, the ADA statewide, everyone gets called, these large, business conglomerates and all of that. And I'm like, look, I'm a board member of the ADA. I'm from Tucson. I'm an immigrant who was standing in line in the Bombay Embassy in 1994. So I'm not exactly like off the Mayflower here, right? Yeah. So it's one of those things where I think that the ADA is actually a very activist group that just hasn't done a great job communicating all the activism we've done in the past. Like, if it wasn't for Steve's involvement with the Xander Welton case in 2014, concentrates wouldn't have been something we could even sell at our stores. There's several people who have lung diseases, who have other issues that, prevent them from taking any form of smokable flower, and they rely on high potency concentrates. I mean, personally, my mom died of breast cancer a few years ago, but even she was trying, CBD THC combos, as I think it turned into palliative care, but this is a potential cure option. And having lived through that, I'm like, yeah, this is not something where I look at it as, a way for people to get high. I think it's a way for people to try all their medical options and see if maybe that works.
Do you think that with the recreational market's going to be, I didn't look at the testing. Is there more testing regulations in the laws, in the new law for the rec law that's going to go into place?
I think that it'll be an extension of the testing bill that passed last year. So right now, to give you some perspective, there are maybe 7 labs that I know of in the whole state of Arizona that, are even likely of getting licensed in any meaningful compliance with the current timeline. So the current timeline is, get licensed, get your ISO certification from a third party, and then apply for your approval to operate from DHS, all of that. And then you need to be up and running and be able to take samples in by November 2020, which, is 11 months away. I know of only 7 groups that are, and the 7, I'm being a little generous. It's probably more like 5, that'll be ready to get their lab licensing. So to me, my concern rather, is that we have potentially about 20,000 samples a month in this state, 20 to probably 30,000 samples, right? Because you're looking at edibles, concentrates, raw material, oils, distillates, all these different products that are produced by the 100 plus, cultivation / production facilities I just told you about, and they're all going to have to go through those 7. So I think there's going to be a massive bottleneck unless we figure something else out in this next few months here. So that's what I've been kind of concerned about the most. Is yes, I've been testing myself, since 2016, but all the other people in Tucson who are not testing, now they're going to have to go to my lab, the same guy I use, and that's going to clog up, the ecosystem, and there's not that many more labs coming online. So those are the things that I'm worried about.
Gotcha. So the bottlenecks are more in like the operational side of it than the supply side of it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like there need to be more labs, getting licensed now so that we're not in a situation where we're literally relying on the same few people, and that's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough year.
Are you able to name any of a couple of the facilities that might be ready?
I believe Delta Verde in Phoenix, from what I understand, is one of them. I think C4 will be fine getting licensed. Level 1 labs will probably be fine getting licensed in Phoenix. Pre-med testing here in Tucson will be fine getting licensed. Desert Valley also. So I think I just named 5 there. Yeah. And to give you some perspective on the seeds, when I saw your contact form, there was one thing I wanted to tell you is we do breed. We do breed some of our own genetics here. We've actually started to get relatively good at that. Some of the stuff you may have even bought if you buy flour and not known that it was bred by us. We need to do a better job of communicating that. At the same time, we're still working out, like, hey, is this the right genetic? But yeah, we've bred some of our own where we'll throw a male plant in there with a bunch of females and then go through, the pheno hunting process to figure out which ones are the better genetics that came out of that pollination. And then, yeah, those, so that's how we'll be providing seeds and adult uses. We'll be doing our own breeding. We won't be getting it from any third parties.
I can tell you, I was back in '98. That was my first. I turned 18, so it was the first election I could vote in. And back then in Cochise County, it was for the representatives. It was Jim Kolb, who was the Kolb, who was the incumbent, and Eddie Basha, who owns all the Basha chains, was running against him. And I showed up to that thing because at the time I was really into all this stuff, and I'd read about how a few years prior, how Arizona had legalized medical marijuana, and it was Jim Kolb who was one of the people who had turned around and flipped that law and just kind of just said, no, you guys didn't understand what you voted on. This was everything. It was everything. It wasn't just medical marijuana. To be fair, it was actually all like class 6 or whatever drugs that they had medicinally legalized. But that was my first entry into politics in my life, was to go there and debate him in his debate, after his debate, when everyone was getting some stuff. I just, as a little 18-year-old kid, just was so confident to go how could you overturn the vote of the state? You don't have the right to do that. You don't have the power to do that. This isn't even in your business. You're our federal representative. You're not even our state representative. Get the hell out of here. What are you doing?
And that's the other thing, right? So there's always been, ever since the Voter Protection Act became part of Arizona's Constitution, which ironically Arpaio is actually one of its supporters, and that ended up protecting medical marijuana. So that was in 2000, and trust me, I'm not an Arpaio fan, but it's just one of those little trivia things. You're like, oh, really?
Yeah, it is one of those kind of things. You're like, huh, he did something all right.
Yeah, yeah. But to give you some perspective, there's always this competition between the legislature, which is 90 people, and the voters, which in 2016 there were 2.6 million people, right, who voted in Arizona. That's a 74% turnout is what we got in 2016. And I think 2020 will be comparable because it's a presidential election. So when you look at that and you say, oh, yeah, we're having this debate. And that's really what it is. When we break it down to its simplest core, are we going to let 90 people in the legislature decide what our law should be, or should we get something written down, show it to the public, and say, you guys can go and vote on this? And then when something wins and 2.6 million people have voted for or against it, that's democracy. 90 people overriding those 2.6 million people doesn't exactly feel like democracy, right? And I think that's probably the biggest part of this whole thing, that perspective. And that's why I think going through the legislature makes no sense. It's like, you want to do something, go and get the signatures, go raise the money you need to. to do that? Why do you think the costs of marijuana are high when you're not able to write off the receptionist or the fact your rent or the people working for you? A lot of people don't know about the 280E tax code, and that because we're considered trafficking, the federal government doesn't let us write off these expenses. And I think that's where it's the community and business need to realize we're activists too, because we're going to have to change that for our businesses to even be worth anything or to survive and sustain over the long term.
Just the cost of getting a license, much less starting that business, and then just all the upfront costs, and then the recurring costs that you have to continuously pay just because this industry is being specifically targeted by so many different factors that it's like a 100x multiplier on what a normal small business has to do, and a normal small business is already hard enough to run.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I think the Department of Health Services digitizing the dispensary agent cards and patient cards, that's honestly one of the best things that's happened, because now, sometimes we'd hire somebody and wait like 3 weeks to get a card in the mail. Now, because it's electronic, we're sometimes seeing, a 48-hour turnaround time, so we can get people on payroll and start training them and doing all those things, where legally they're not even allowed to be in the premises unless they have a card. So there's all these little things we've had to deal with. Luckily, the Department of Health Services has been pretty good, to us in terms of, I think they understand the hell we have to go through. So they don't, as long as we're doing everything in a compliant way, they don't go out of their way to make life hard for us. I think long term, I would like to see card costs go down. Missouri's program has $25 cards. We're obviously at 150 here. So those are things we need to talk about going forward. But, for right now, I support medical. I just don't think that adult use should be done in a way that doesn't include all these other, expungement, home grow, all that stuff.
I do want to see everybody who does have something on their record get that stuff off. I mean, they can't even work in this industry right now, some of them, because they have that.
That's it right there. Brian, you nailed it right there, because some of the more, I want to say competent people, but the ones who know what they're doing in that environment, sometimes we're not allowed to hire them. And that has often been the case where, they don't have any violent convictions or anything like that on their record, but if they've had anything happen to them in this space, we can't hire them. And we've turned away plenty of people in the last few years because of, that fact. And the law doesn't allow us to hire anybody that has such, any drug-related offenses on their record. So that is something from that perspective where it'll open up as an employer, it'll open up, opportunities, not just for us, but even for others who have been wanting to hire these people, and they're like, yeah, okay, fine. So, how many people have jobs who have had DUIs? Plenty of them. So I think it's the same thing where we just treat it like any other thing and say, okay, let's move past it.
But in Tucson, they care. People care about local stuff. There are a ton of local events that focus on local everything, and people that are local-minded. Like, it's kind of nice to see that we have that here. This is really probably the most progressive place in Arizona. I guess Bisbee, but Bisbee doesn't really can't fit that many people.
Right, and that's why, again, going back to this, maybe I have a little... This has been something I've been wanting to tell a reporter for a while. Once, Smart and Safe started getting attacked for being like all corporate, but I'm like, I'm a UFA guy. I was working a desk job, doing whatever healthcare information system stuff until 2013. And for me, and I'm an immigrant, first generation, so I always go back to corporate cannabis is not what you think it is. I mean, we're local people. Start out with 3 employees. Today we have over 100 people in Tucson. And it's like, you do that because you're trying to grow and to have more products that, you can sell to other dispensaries. And I think that business aspect of it is sometimes tied in with just, everything else that people like.
The one last thing I just was thinking about that we didn't talk about with this law is the disproportionately affected communities. All the ways that this bill is based, the Smart and Safe is basically going to the different things that it has in there to help out the communities that were disproportionately affected by the past law, I guess is the wording in there. Is there anything you wanted to add in about that part of Smart and Safe?
I mean, to me, it's like, that's almost the Rodney Jones section, right? You have a guy who was arrested and then prosecuted. He was an African-American kid in Yavapai County in Prescott Valley, did serious prison time, went through the process in an appeals court with an attorney who wasn't that good, lost there, we get involved, help him out with the ADA. Just so you know, did put the legal bill for Rodney Jones going to the Supreme Court, and then he won there. And to me, that's a living example of being black in Yavapai County cost this guy 2 years of his freedom while he had a kid at home. And should he have a shot at being part of the industry? Absolutely. I think he should, because he was targeted. Call it because of race, because of the way he looked, because of what the people around him thought he was, and I think those are the factors that make Smart and Safe, superior to any of the other initiatives out there, because it looks at that specific problem, something that could actually have hurt not one man, but 215,000 patients today, would have been impacted by a negative ruling there, and it was because he was from that disproportionately affected community.
That is true, and that was honestly my favorite part of that bill when I was going through everything, was when I saw the disproportionate community. I saw some of the other stuff, the teachers' fund and some of the other things. There were some nice things in there, but that particular one stuck out to me because I've seen. I mean, I grew up in Arizona. I grew up in Sierra Vista, so I've seen some of the ways that people are treated versus the way that I'm treated, and it's night and day. It really is, and so that's. The ADA and MITA, the Marijuana Industry Trade Association, along with NORML and the Marijuana Policy Project in Arizona, are all in agreement with some of the more hardcore activists. While we disagree on some of the other details, everyone's looking forward to taking some huge steps forward in 2020. There are a lot of people whose lives are going to be positively impacted by this, and as far as we can tell, nobody who's going to be negatively impacted. But I am going to continue following this story from the Phoenix perspective, the overall state perspective, and from the Southern Arizona perspective. As an Arizona medical patient myself, I have a stake in this. All I want as a patient is to be healthy, to be safe, and to be free to do it. We've come a long way from what the cannabis industry looked like back when I was a kid. I never want to go back to the 20th century laws or the good old days. If I were a betting man, I would say that Arizona is going to legalize in 2020, but it's not going to be easy from there. That's just the start of a long, hard battle that the dispensaries are going to have, the industry is going to have, from outside interests with a lot of money and grassroots activists that will always hate corporations, regardless of how friendly they are. But that's the state of Arizona's cannabis community in 2020. Stay tuned to my YouTube channel, thoughtforyourpenny.com, and the Phoenix New Times for more. I'll be contributing at least another story to Phoenix New Times. It's a great publication that I hope to keep supporting all the way through the election. Stay tuned to subscribe for more.